Good morning. This morning on the Care Without Crisis interview series, we have with us a good friend of mine, Andrea Torres, um, who has also been a caregiver over the course of her adult life. And she and I have had the opportunity to swap some stories about what it was like caring for loved ones, and all that comes with that. I'm going to just jump right into it. And before we get into the caregiving chapter of your life, Andrea, good morning, first of all.
Morning.
And I'd like for you to start off by telling me a little bit about your parents, who they were to you.
Oh, who they were to me. They were my left and right heart beats. They were everything to me. My mom, I'm the baby of of the family. They both have been married before. I'm the only one they have together. My mom was the one that showed me how to be a lady, how to cook, all the things. My dad was how to be independent, how to be a tomboy without crossing the line. I had my own tools. If wood needed to be put away, come on, help me get this wood in. They made me who I am, and they were just everything. So this is a whole new kind of normal for me in this space because the last several years, I was their person and they were mine, but the responsible one to go look after them. But they were everything. They were everything. So
I've
I
heard,
guess that's where my sass comes from. I always laugh. I said, two bulls had a scorpion child. How does that work?
I've heard
So,
stories about your parents over the years. You know, I know. So I want to ask you something, particularly about your father. I've heard stories, but was there a specific moment, like a phone call, a visit, conversation, where you realized that something had kind of shifted, that they needed you in a different way?
yeah, so my dad was in the military. He was special forces, airborne. He did all the things. And so with that, over the years, his body took a lot of wear and tear. Some appointments may have been missed or whatever if he was deployed. So over time, he developed a heart issue. He retired in the late 80s. And so he stayed in the States until 2003. And then he went back to Puerto Rico, which is where he was from. So before he left, he had had a heart event, a cardiac event, and he had to go to Chapel Hill. They flew him from Fort Bragg to Chapel Hill, and he had to have a pacemaker. So that kind of was another crossroads. He had many before that, but that was kind of the main crossroads. Time progressed. He moved to Puerto Rico. All was fine. He always kept up with his appointments. I didn't worry about him so much. My mom was that was another situation because you almost had to drag her to the doctor's appointments. But daddy stayed on top of his stuff. So 2003, September, we talked every day. Ever since Maria, we talked every day, multiple times a day. Um, and I felt like my dad and I were so connected that at night, if he went to the hospital, I would wake up out of my sleep. I was like, something's not right, and call the next morning, couldn't reach him. Well, this particular day, I called him, couldn't get a hold of him. I was like, something is off. And I said, well, he probably just went to bed. I'll try him in the morning. Sunday morning in the September 2023, and called him, still didn't answer. Went to breakfast. He called me. And before he said a word, I always listen to the background noise. And I heard a monitor. I know what it sounds like. It's not the microwave that we get on Instagram now. So I was like, where are you? I'm at the hospital. I said, what happened? And so he told me. He always played it down because he knows I can go from 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. And he was like, I'm okay, but you're not because you're in the hospital. So long story short, he had pneumonia. He already had congestive heart failure. The two cannot coexist. So, but he sounded good. So I said, okay. So we chatted. I said, I'll check on you later. Let it go. Monday came. We chatted again. And he sounded like he was turning around. He was making jokes. Tuesday, I didn't hear from him and I couldn't reach him. That's when the first red flag went up for me. And then I was like, something's not right. Now, I have the last name of a Puerto Rican child, but my Spanish is non-existent. I can get you some food and get you some directions. That's about it. In the medical world, it's a wash. So no one was calling me, no one was letting me know anything. So I started sending emails to I found the patient advocacy contacts and I started sending them emails. And then someone finally wrote me back. Someone called, talked to the doctor, and I said, I haven't heard from him. I don't know what's going on. So she was kind of playing it down. I was like, nope, something's not right. I bought a ticket and I was in the air. So I got there, went straight to the hospital. As I'm driving, the doctor calls and he's trying to tell me what's going on with my dad. And I said, if you can just afford me 20 minutes, I literally just landed. Let me get to the hospital. And when I got there, he met me in the hall and he was like, um, this is a new side that I've seen in your father. He's normally very independent, and I've noticed a decline in the last 6 months or so. And I said, I would agree. Um, he said, there's nothing else we can do. And that's something you don't ever want to hear. And I used to think of my dad as like, I used to call him little cat because I said, you got like 9 lives. And I think you have some on layaway somewhere because every time I think this is it, you keep popping back up. So I didn't know how to take that. And it was kind of surreal. And so when he suggested hospice, I just shut down and I just burst into tears because unbeknownst to the doctor, um, I literally had just put my mother in hospice within days of my dad. And I did like a final document as I was sitting on the tarmac to come to him. So I just had a moment and he was very apologetic. I said, well, you didn't know. I mean, and you didn't do this to either of them. So we had to figure out the hospice piece. So he was like, well, doesn't he have a partner? I said, yeah, he does. I said, but I don't trust her or her family to be with him in that capacity, knowing I'm basically between my mom and dad. I'm literally going back and forth. So I said, I'll find some place. And I found a place in San Juan, not too far from the hospital, from the VA, for him to go.
How
And
long, how much time did you have to make that decision?
so let's see. I got there on like maybe a Wednesday, I think, maybe a Wednesday or Thursday. Um, saw Daddy maybe within days, like I would say 2 to 3 days max.
Right.
So they afforded me a cushion. The social worker was trying to help, and they weren't pushing him out, and they knew that I didn't know the lay of the land like that. So it took me a minute. And so I went and looked at some places, and I always looked at it as where would I want to be? Because I wasn't just going to stick him anywhere. I was like, where would I want to be if I were him? Would I want to be here? What does it look like? What does it smell like? How are the people acting? What do the other patients look like? Are they just sitting around the nurse's station just in a daze? How attentive are they being? And you really have to pay attention to some of these facilities. Some you don't have to do that much work till they kind of tell on themselves. So
I was going to ask, the spirit of this whole Care Without Crisis series is sort of what you're describing, if that you just don't always have a lot of time.
right.
And I'm trying to get people to grasp that it can happen so quickly.
Yeah.
Your life for that matter is going in one direction, and within an instant, not only does their life change, but your life changes. So
Yeah.
to that end, I guess I'm going to kind of speak to the family stress and dynamics. How did they like the responsibility? How did the responsibility land across your family? Was it distributed, or did it fall mostly on
It's
you?
on me. It's on me. There was never a discussion. Well, I always say parents are like our managers at work. You know who has skill sets for what and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And sometimes like my family is its own version of the Brady Bunch, if you will. Both my parents had children from previous marriages, but I was the only one that they had together. My siblings on my mom's side are significantly older than me, and my brother from my dad, we're like maybe 4 years apart. But it's the response. Who responds? Who is responsible? How so I always say parents give us, they're not tasks, but they end up being a task because you kind of show yourself or who you are. Are you a person of integrity? Are you responsible? How are you moving in your life? Are you responsible? Are you living check to check? Are you a saver? How can they take care of me if they're not taking care of themselves? But my dad trusted me, and I was his person. So I've been on the beltway on my way to work, get a phone call. Oh, I turned that car around and I'm headed home packing on the phone, making flight arrangements, whatever, because that's who I was to him and who he was to me. My brother, from him, he was kind of aloof. He wasn't really around. My dad saw how he moved with a couple of things, and he wasn't his pick. That's just what it was.
Yeah. What did it feel? I guess I'm gonna ask you, what did it feel like to carry that weight? Well, kind of while others were stepping back or staying distant. I mean, were there
It's
disagreements, or I mean,
it's
how
frustrating at first. I feel like my mom's situation hit first before daddy. Daddy was very independent much longer than my mom was because he was still in his house in Puerto Rico, still driving, doing all the things. My mom, her decline came a little quicker. So I moved her here from North Carolina in like what, 2008, 2009. She came up here after she had had a stroke, and I realized she couldn't be home by herself. Meanwhile, in that space, my brother from her literally lived 5 minutes around the corner from her and was not checking on her. And I had to do a wellness check, calling the police department to go check on her. And that made me mad. But I knew I couldn't be lax. They always showed up for me, and so I knew it was my charge to show up for them. The Bible says, "Honor thy mother and thy father, and thy days will be long and prosperous upon the earth." And I took that seriously, regardless of how I felt. I felt like, in terms of, well, why aren't they doing something? Because there was no time for that. I would tell people I can cry, scream, cuss, shout, call them, cuss them out, whatever. At the end of the day, I was an army of one. And that's how I viewed myself. I couldn't wait for them to check in and be like, okay, let's do this. Because a couple of them, their lives were a mess. So you can barely help yourself. And even when I made the decision at one point, because I moved my mom into it's called a community-based assisted living facility. Basically, it looks like a house. It is a house. It's almost like a senior group home, but it's a smaller set of residents in there. And you have to do your due diligence with those too, because sometimes some of them double up residents in the space. And my mom was not a double up kind of gal, so she had to have a room to herself. I was also mindful, how often are they bathed? How is the food? And this just worked perfectly for our situation. But I couldn't dwell in that space of what they were doing, what they weren't doing. I had to keep
did,
moving forward. So,
did it change your relationships with
yes,
siblings or friends? Yeah, yeah.
yes. So, um, one brother, well, my mom's son, my brother from her, I always say he's like I'm going to behave myself, Dean. He's like a broke J.R. Ewing. You got all the ego and machismo of J.R., but your pockets are empty as a bum in a jailhouse. So I'm telling you things as a courtesy. I'm not asking your permission or asking for your insight because I'm the one here in the trenches with my mother. You're not. And so he's had every opportunity to step up, and he just never did. So it made me salty. I'm not going to lie. It made me salty because they were living their best life, if you will, at whatever capacity. And I was doing what I needed to do, stressed out, um, not being able to go on vacations like I want. There were some days I didn't even have, and I was making uh, six figures at the time, a low six figures, but I still made my dots connect, and I always felt like God. Every time I got a new job, I got more money and more money because I he knew what my charge was.
Mhm.
So there were times I didn't even have gas because gas money for gas. I was counting change, but I never told my dad because every time we would get off the phone, he's like, "Do you need something?" Nope, I got it because she was my responsibility.
Yeah, I was going to ask you like the financial strain is, and this is one of the things I wanted to get into. I think I can speak personally, and I know you and I have spoken about this. It just I don't quite think a lot of folks just grasp what it costs. Like, can you talk honestly about the financial reality of caregiving? Like, not just the cost even, but what it meant, what it meant to your own financial life. How did it impact you? I mean,
Oh, when my mom first got sick, I was a consultant and I was just making my way because I had been in a different field, finished grad school and switched over. So I was a freshly minted six-figure salary gal and thought I was doing it until life came around the corner. And then I had a mortgage. I had my own bills, student loans, all the things. And so I'm looking, I'm just like, how is this going to work? She, she didn't have the financial backing that my dad had. My dad was a retired military vet. He had about 3 or 4 checks coming in, and I was laughing. I said, "Do you know, sir, you make more at home with your feet crossed watching your westerns than some people make going out every day working 2 full-time jobs." And we would just laugh, but that worked to his benefit. My mom was not in that space, so I had to connect the dots. And I was blessed where she was because they were charging what they were charging, but I could do it. And it was more than my mortgage and my bills put together. It was still more than that. But thank God I was never over um extended in my space so I could do it. Even going in lack, as long as my mortgage was paid, my utilities, I had some gas to get to work, some a little cable and some groceries. I was good. My basic needs were met. She was the main one. Um, but essentially, I could have had a live-in housekeeper for that, for what I was paying for her every year.
were there decisions that you made like that, savings, retirement, that you, I mean, how much
So
impact you?
yes, with that, because we've talked about this, I had to start all over again. I had, first of all, well, I was able to get her on this program. It's a community-based waiver. And, but to get the waiver, you have to go on a waiting list. And she was on that waiting list for years. So with that, the state will come in and will pay some of her costs, but they will also take what she was getting for Social Security and whatever she was getting for retirement. That's fine. That was a even exchange in my book. Um, but it was still a lot. It was still a lot. And with him, and it was cheaper than some other places because now, like even the memory care place, if you've seen it on what's that on Crane Highway on in Crofton, you coming in the door at $7,000.
Per
And
month?
and yes, per
Yeah.
month. And everything else is a la carte.
Yeah.
So, and then as you matriculate and go to a more intensive care area for memory care, the costs increase.
Yeah.
So, and even with hospice care, where my dad was, when he got moved in that day, I had to write a check for $8,000.
I listen to friends, you say when you make plans, God laughs. I listen to people talk about all the plans they have, and I don't want to be negative. I don't want to scare people, but
No, but it's
tell
real
them what
talk.
you really that retirement that you're planning.
But I had to start all over. I had an account, retirement account. And because my mom, like I said, didn't have the finances that my dad did, and mine was only gonna get me but so far, I basically had to exhaust what I had in my retirement to get her going until to buy me a little breathing room until I could figure out completely how this was gonna work in totality. So I had to start all over with my retirement.
If you were sitting with a family today, if you in hindsight, um, if you could tell them like, before starting this whole journey, what would you want to tell a family about the financial side of it? What advice would you give before the crisis hits?
Um, Save for a rainy day. That's a real thing. Um, I know there's some long-term care options that some people can buy into, or different types of insurances that you can buy. Make that an option. Make smarter moves. If you have this extra discretionary income, or as I like to say, oh, I deserve that money, don't. And I'm not saying don't live and don't indulge yourself, but be smart about it. Truly, if you give $5, if I say, okay, I'm gonna put 250 aside from here, I'm gonna do this with $1 and do this with the difference. Save some money, make smart decisions, make smart moves. Don't be overextended with credit card debt, and you got to have the latest and greatest cars or whatever, because that is a depreciating asset that's not going to count down the road at some point. So just talk to someone early and often about estate planning, or I'm sure there's a much like what you're doing, Dean, like what would we call you? Like a care liaison to say what's coming down the road. Try to be involved in your parents' finances sooner than later. Make sure your finances can adjust and take a little bump if something were to happen, because it's real. And don't think, oh, I got other siblings, they'll do it. No, they won't.
I think I had a conversation with someone recently that and I what he said was, when you have siblings, you already know you're the one. Oftentimes with family members, a lot of the siblings, even though it's not spoken, you know which one it's going to be. Whether you want to own it or not, you know it's going to be you. And like you said, you knew it was going to be you.
Yeah.
You don't want
I
to own
mean,
it, but and I think what happens is you keep hoping for that help to come, but it's
it's not.
not coming.
It's not. Look in
Well,
the mirror. You're the help.
yeah,
Or unless you look to the hills, Jesus is your help in yourself. Make sure you have a good group of friends that can support you, and some of them who have some of those battle scars that can listen to them. If they're telling you stuff, because I was trying to tell people, oh, you might want to have this conversation with your parents to do this. And, oh, no, I don't have to worry about that right now. You can be an ostrich and put your head in the sand if you want to. It is not a pleasant situation when you get surprised. And if you see some decline or something that makes you be like, what's that? Pay attention to it.
okay.
Pay attention to it.
That's good stuff.
I mean, get a power of attorney. Make sure you do that. Because my mom used to say, you don't need to be in my business. Girl, you don't have any business. If you don't have seven figures somewhere, 7 to 8, you have no business. We're just taking care of what we need to take care of in this space. Because people think if you have that conversation, you're like speeding it. No, you're preparing yourself
We were
so
really
that.
fortunate. My mom and dad were willing. They were retired government employees. They didn't have much,
Mhm.
but they were very willing to talk about it. It wasn't when I breached the subject, they were like, okay, set up a meeting. And they were just very matter of fact about it, got all of us together, and we had a couple meetings, and it was easy. They made it very easy for us to have a conversation. But what you're telling me is what I hear often that some people don't, and I think it's culturally, we don't often like
And
talk.
then like I noticed, and depending on the setup, like one of my girlfriends, it's 4 girls and 1 boy, and the boy don't ever want to have nothing to do with anything talking about coming to the end of one's life. Oh no, y'all handle that. I don't have time for that. Okay. Somebody has to. Even if everybody plays a role or understands what their role is and they play that role hard and strong and 10 toes down. But if you don't, you're going to have to be prepared to take care of all of it by yourself. And that's just real life. And I was grateful for my dad because he always wanted to have that conversation. I felt like every time I would go visit him, I was being prepared for a CIA mission because he was be like, Where's this? Where's that? This is where this is. That's where that is. You see that briefcase over there? This is where you're going to find X, Y, and Z. Okay, come on. We got to go to the bank. This lady needs to see your face and you need to see hers. Every time. Every time. There's money in this drawer. This and that. Okay, Daddy, I got it. But just
It makes it
listen.
easier. It makes it easier though.
Yeah, it does. Because I always tell people it's easier to have that conversation when they can talk back and dialogue with you than, God forbid, if they're incapacitated and they're not able to express what their wishes are and they don't have it documented anywhere. I mean, even for ourselves at this age, because people are leaving out of here regardless. You don't have to be, in your 70s, 80s, or 90s to leave out of here. So do that for yourself now. So one time I went to see Daddy, and whenever I would go, I'd tell him, "Have your list ready. What you want to do, what you want me to help you with this time, and then we'll start on it tomorrow morning." He's like, "Okay." So I get there, and we'll eat, hang out, chit chat, catch up. And I was going to go to bed. I said, "Okay, what are we doing tomorrow?" He said, "First thing we're going to go is to the funeral home." I said, "You can't react. Don't react. Just be like, oh, okay. Is it something I should know about? Something going on I should know about? You're not telling me?" He's like, "No, just something we need to do." Okay. So the morning comes, we go to the funeral home. He's already been there and talked to the lady. "This is my daughter I was telling you about." Okay, now we're gonna sit down and get down. She pulls out. I said, "Okay, he's been here to do his due diligence." So then the room that we go into, that's where the caskets are. So he's like, "Okay, go pick one." I said, "Wait a minute. Wait, hold up." I said, "What?" He said, "Go pick one." And I said, "Why am I picking it?" He was like, "Just pick one." So I picked what I like. It was beautiful. It was wood, and it was, and he looked, "Is that how you want to spend your money?" And I said, "You told me to pick one." He said, "Well, whatever I got is coming to you. So is that how you want to spend your money?" I said, "Well, I want you to have a proper send off." He said, "I'm not gonna know. I'm not gonna know." So I picked something else. It was maybe a couple $100 cheaper. I was like, "Okay, Daddy." So we sat down. He said, "Where's your notebook?" Because I always had a notebook. He said, "I want to be buried in this." He wanted to be buried in this dress blues. He wanted a black tie. He told me everything. He said, "You don't have to worry about the cemetery because I'm going to the National Cemetery. They're going to take care of all that." And it was just a very matter of fact conversation, which I appreciated. And we went, got a cashier's check, paid for it. And that's when I knew, not that I ever questioned that my daddy loved me, but that just took it to a whole nother level. And I was like, that's probably why I'm as messed up as I am right now. But I thought about it, and he said to me, he said, "I know all this is going to be on you during that time." He said, "If there's anything that I can do while I'm here on this side to help minimize your stress when I'm not here, then that's what I want to do." And that just meant the world to me. So, and when that time came, I everything was paid for. I had the receipt. I had everything I needed. I think I only had to pay like a hundred and some dollars for some little miscellaneous um cost, but I mean I still had to pick out the flowers and all the other stuff, but everything else was done. So the funeral home coordinated with the military cemetery. So I really didn't have to do much of anything, and I could just be in my space of loss, as be present but not be, have to be fully engaged in trying to figure out all this in the midst of the house burning down.
I'm gonna turn the page a little bit. You and I talked about this. And I have this conversation with friends of mine now about I often hear people tell me, what they can't do, what they won't do. So this is kind of more of an intimate conversation about uncomfortable moments when you
Mhm.
deal with your parents. I think again, people kind of, to your point, bury their head in the sand and think, I'm not gonna have to do it. Somebody else will handle that.
Uh-huh.
And again, the other person handling that, it's ultimately going to be you, and unless
Yep.
you have the finances to take care of it. So there are parts of caregiving that nobody prepares for, like the very physical, very intimate parts, helping parents bathe, dress, using the bathroom. Can you talk about what it was like for you, knowing how close you were to your father? And I'll share some too if you want. It's a very challenging.
Probably both of
I
them.
will tell you this story. I tell folks when my father got sick, and we didn't know what it was. It was ended up he had surgery on his neck, and he came home was fine. And then he got really sick, really kind of out of his mind sick, like vomiting. Just he couldn't control, couldn't keep anything down. Nothing. Couldn't control his bowels. He was talking out his head. Didn't know who we were. We were like, "What in the world is going on?" My father, he was just fine 2 days ago, and they were like, "Well, he's old." We're like, "He's old, but he ain't that old. He was just
Right,
we just were watching the game 2 nights ago together, laughing."
right.
So my brother and sister and I were shifting, taking shifts, and I came in the house one night. I think I shared the story with you. My brother was coming out, put on his coat, and he just gave me a box of rubber gloves. I looked at him. I said, "It's like that?" He was like, "Yeah, it's like that." And he just walked out the door. And that was my indoctrination to okay, something.
It's good happening. Hmm.
By the time I got upstairs, I recognized that we were in a whole another chapter. So you tell me what it was like for you.
So it's funny. So with my mom, um, my mother ended up being an amputee. Um, she wasn't diabetic. My mother fell and broke her hip, and when she went to also pay attention when you send them to rehab. Went to rehab, and it was what I thought. It looked nice. It was a new facility. I was like, okay, we good here. No, because the nursing staff, they were not what they should have been. Long story short, she got a blister on her heel because my mother had peripheral arterial disease. She had poor circulation. She ended up being basically getting gangrene in her foot, in her heel, and it had to be amputated. So I always had to help. And she didn't have a prosthetic, so I had to pick her up, stand her up, and pivot her to a wheelchair and stuff. So she was from North Carolina, so periodically I take her to North Carolina, and I because she still had siblings down there, so we would go and we'd get a hotel room or whatever. I had to bathe her because her caregiver I mean, she wasn't going. So I had to bathe her. And so she would get embarrassed. She was like, I don't want you to have to do this. Lady, you got the same parts I have. It's fine. It is fine. Now, some of it she could do herself, but I was like, don't be embarrassed with me. I mean, you did it for me. You're my mom. So she and I would laugh and we would get through it. So that other one of mine, um, he had come from the hospital at one point, and my dad always had a sense of humor. So his little girlfriend was there, and I was like, okay. So when he came from the hospital, his legs were weak, so he couldn't get up to go to the bathroom like he normally would with his rollator. So he had to wear the Depends. I said, oh, she's gonna take care of that. I'm not gonna do that. And so after a while, he used to call me Dee Dee. Dee Dee, I said, oh my God. I said, what does he want? I said, yes, sir. He was like, I need you to change my Depends. And I was thinking, she's standing there looking at me. I said, okay, again, you can't react beyond so much. So I was still trying to maintain a level of discretion and his virtue or whatever. So I'm doing it. And he was like, he looking over some of that powder back there, like that powder. I was like, okay, daddy. So I'm trying to hurry it up and do a thorough job. And then at one point, but I couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying. He was saying, what's wrong? Am I hurting you? What's wrong? What's wrong? He was like, you slapped my balls, you slapped my balls. And I couldn't do nothing but laugh. I said, I'm sorry. He said, you never thought you'd be doing this in your wildest dreams, did you? And I said, nope. I said, but you're my daddy. And if you don't mind, I don't mind. I mean, because at that point, it goes out the door for me, and I've had other friends, to your point, my friend in North Carolina, he was taking care of his mother because his brother, who was living in the house with her, would not help his own mother. And the other friend would have to come from Charlotte to help with stuff. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. So
Yeah.
it's like,
The reality of it is too, it comes down to, when they get to, particularly when they're immobile, they'll end up getting bed sores in bed.
yeah,
So you have to change them.
yes,
They can't sit and a
For
diaper.
so long.
You
And
gotta
no.
do it. So either you're gonna do it or you're gonna pay for the care to come do it.
Mhm.
And sometimes it comes down to finances. We were kind of engaging in that conversation with my mother and father, and my brother was like, "Listen, we got my next door neighbor Dorian busts his heart taking care of Miss Burks next door." And my brother said, "Listen, he's over there doing it by himself, and we're no better than he is. So if he's doing it, why can't we? We got to figure it out." So we called the caregiver and said, "They teach us how to do this." Nobody wants to have to do it, but you're going to do it because it's either going to be you or a caregiver. But you can't. They would do it for you.
Yeah.
That's,
And that's how I
that's
looked
how we
at it.
would
I
do it.
was
They would do
like,
it for us.
they care for us when we couldn't care for ourselves. And it what they say, once, what is it? Once a man, twice a child.
Mhm.
Same thing, we grow up and at some point, God forbid, I mean, we'll be in that spot, but I don't have a me. I don't have children. So that's a whole nother situation in and of itself, you
Mhm.
know.
So
But
it's
I looked at that time with both of them, especially that last month with my dad. I mean, he would let me shave him. I had never done that before, and but I knew he trusted me. So, and I knew what he liked in terms of like his cologne and stuff and all that. So he would hold his head up and let me shave him, and to me that added to my connection with him.
yeah.
So, because I knew he again still trusted me on another level.
Yeah.
So,
I think people, I mean, I don't, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but
mhm,
necessarily one you really gain an appreciation of what nurses do on a daily basis. And they do
yeah,
CNAs, nurses, home health aides, I mean, they do it with their eyes closed and they do it 2, 3 times a day. They could change somebody and 5 minutes later have to come back, change it again, and don't
mm,
even not to mention, a lot of times they're getting abused verbally and
yeah,
sometimes
I was gonna say they're getting
they
cussed
do
out,
they do it every
yelled at.
day, and I mean, those people are just angels. What they do every day. So I thought about that, and a few times I've had to do it for my parents. I mean, you will clean them, you will bathe them, you will wipe them, you will do whatever it has to take. But you have to have conversations with family and friends to
Yeah,
understand if you're not going to do it, then you better find somebody that's going to do it, and you better come up with the money to pay them because, contrary to what people believe, insurance doesn't often cover that.
no,
You're paying this out of pocket. So I try to
yes,
encourage
because
people.
some people be like, "Oh, well, she has Medicare." Medicare doesn't pay for that. Medicare does not pay for assisted living. And then to be on Medicaid, I don't know what the rules of engagement now. I mean, I knew what they were with my mom and stuff. Um, You can't have beyond a certain amount of assets. You cannot show what is it? Any transactions from one person to another within a certain amount of years, because that becomes problematic. So there are all these different nuances that you have to be privy to and aware of. But in the middle of being in that space, you need to have some money set aside for just in case to connect the dots to get you from, in case the bridge goes out, how am I going to get to the other side? Because you're going to have something. If otherwise, you're going to be that something. They're going to be in your house on top of every other stressor that you have going on. And God forbid, or should I say, bless those who are, I call them, well, we call them the sandwich generation. You have children that you're still raising. Some people now have their grandkids that they're still raising. And now here come your parents.
Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, I've pretty much known you my entire adult life. I've known you a long time.
Yeah, yes.
But there are periods of time, even when you were dealing with your parents, that people kind of the people in your life that just seemingly disappear. You don't know where they went, but a lot of them are dealing with stuff like the emotional weight of it. So were there with you? I mean, because you were dealing with both parents at the same time, kind of like with my family, like right now. Were there emotions that surprised you? Was it resentment? Were there things that you genuinely? I mean, I'm sure you didn't know whether you were coming and going sometimes, but was it anything that hit you that just knocked you off your feet?
I mean, I had moments of anxiety, times you feel like you're on an island by yourself because at the time I was going through it, a lot of my friends weren't going through that. So some couldn't relate. So, and it made me feel like I had to self isolate a little bit. Um, And that's when I realized you realize how big and how small your village truly is. Because everybody who says they're your friend, they're not your friend. So if nobody's checking on you and you're always the one that's checking, sometimes you need to do a Homer Simpson, just lean in the bushes and see who comes looking for you, because you will realize it's not as many as you thought. But I've realized I'd rather have a faithful few than a whole fleet of fake. So, and there were times it just got to be so much. And then I had a dog at the time. I still have one, but stuff was happening with her. And one day I just broke, and I was sitting in the closet, literally just crying. I was just like, I am tired. I am so tired, And then here she comes. She was trying to lick. I said, girl, we don't get down like that. We're a black family. You don't lick me in the face. But she felt my anxiety and knew what was going on. And then I have, a couple girlfriends, they'd be like, come on, we going out. I was like, I can't afford to go out to that restaurant, girl. I can't do it. And they'd be like, we got you. So if you have a small crew, but they're a faithful crew and somebody you can call and lean on and just lay it down with them, you're blessed. Because some people may not have that. And then you got to figure out what that release is for yourself. If it's just a walk. And during that space, I started running because I didn't have to talk to anybody. All I had to do was focus on my breath and just listen to God and just be by myself. But you have to find that balance for yourself in the midst of being in that situation with your parents. But you go through every emotion. And then I lived and died with my phone. Every time the phone rang, my heart sank. If it was early in the morning, late at night, my heart sank. And and my heart would start racing. And then the caregiver for my mom would be like, it's okay, baby. Nothing's wrong. Nothing is wrong, you know. But yeah, it's like this all the time, all the time, all the time.
I'm going to close out with a few questions, maybe two or three, close to. Um, in spite of everything, what are you proud of? What's something that you're the most proud of that surprised you, maybe that you feel for yourself? What are you proud of?
That I connected the dots for them. You're gonna make me cry. I connected the dots for them, and I was there for them when they needed me. Um, One lady I used to work with was like, "How do you do it?" And I said, "I don't really think about it to some degree. You just do it. Yeah, it may be an inconvenient time to get a call for this, but that's your mom, that's your dad. You got to do it." And I was proud that I really felt like I was an army of one. I felt like I was a ranger on a mission and I had to get them to the other side. And, I always laughed because he would call and give me assignments because he always watched something on TV and he would see an infomercial. Can you go find me such and such? And I tell people, I wish I could have one of those assignments right now because I miss that dude. I miss both of them. If she didn't want what they were serving that day, and I called, what do you want? You know what I want, girl. So I was proud that I poured it all out for them. I bared everything I had for them. And I'm proud of that.
Right.
Because I've seen some people move and they're barely flinching for their mom and dad. And I feel like and I know this sounds corny, when a red bird shows up, I feel like that's them saying hi, or, God saying, well done, girl, you did it. You did what you were supposed to, what you were charged to do. So I was there with my mom when she drew her last breath, as she was with me when I took my first. And I had to leave my dad on a Wednesday because I kept pushing my time to leave because I didn't want to leave him. But I was like, I can't be in two places at one time. I never told him bye. I just said, Daddy, I said, I'm gonna see you later. And I kissed him. My plan was to come back within 5 days, 4 to 5 days. I left on a Wednesday. My plan was to come back by that Monday or Tuesday. He passed on that Friday. And sometimes they'll go and they don't want you there. Because he asked me, he said, how long I gotta be here? And I just, I said, until you get your strength up. And he kind of looked at me like, okay. And he was doing his things, and I was kind of in denial, honestly. I didn't think he was gonna go. He didn't make it to that. He didn't make it a week. I put him in hospice on a Monday. Daddy left on a Friday, but he did it like he always did it. It was on his terms, and I'm sure he wouldn't have wanted me there when he left. But I'm proud that I was there for them the way that I was, as much as I was. So
Proud you were too. It does matter. I mean, it matters that you're able to look back at it and say you laid on the line for your parents because they would have done it for you. And it feels like you kind of you did what you were supposed to do, you know.
yes, speak about it. And I always say this. So some friends who had gone through it before said something to me, and I just you kind of hear it, and you like, oh, I get it now. At the service, I always laugh. When you're at a funeral, the one that's always trying to climb in the casket, that's the one that didn't do enough. If you sitting there calm and you know you poured it out, you are calm because you did what you were supposed to do. You have no regrets. You said what you needed to say. You did what you were supposed to do. I don't need to climb in the casket with them.
Perfectly said. One last question. One last question. Now that you've been on the other side of this in this interview, what does care without crisis mean to you? What given everything you've been through and what you've seen, now that you've been on the other side of this camera, what does the care without crisis initiative mean to you? What can we share with other families?
Have the conversations, no matter how difficult and uncomfortable they may be. Know what your resources are. If your parent is a vet, know what's available to you through that space. Know what's available through state programs, whatever state you may live in. Have the conversations with the family. Know what your parents' wishes are in terms of their long-term care and their funeral care. What is it that they want? Just have the difficult conversations. Well, that's the crux of everything, is just communication and just to plan as much as you can for what may be inevitable. And because it's something that we all will have to do.
Tell you what, on that note, I want to close this interview out. You did a wonderful job. I'm,
I'm glad. I didn't want to embarrass you today, so I tried to do my best.
I'm sure they have plenty of time to embarrass me in the future. But thank you. Thank you for joining me. I hope, like I say, I always say, I hope we can help somebody with this conversation. I appreciate you getting some of this off of you. You probably needed to get it off your chest anyway. So
Well,
we will
thank you
talk.
for asking me. I always want to help people because I always try to share my journey with my friends. And so that, if you kind of know the lay of the land, just to help them dodge. If I know there's a sinkhole over there, don't go over there, girl. It's quicksand. Do this instead. Then that's also a value add for me in my experience. And it also honors my mom and dad in that space because, they afforded me that experience to share with somebody else.
Well, thank you. I hope we help somebody today.
Welcome. Thank you.
So you have a great weekend.
You too, babe. Love you.
Love you too. Thank you. Bye bye.